Hello, everyone. Welcome to my show, The Real Estate Regroup Show. I am your host, LJ Walker. In honor of Black History Month, I wanted to present some examples from our past to inspire you to own a home or invest in one. I was looking at a study one day, and it showed that most Black American people are not buying property as much as other ethnic groups. And this is particularly true right here in New York City, even more so. Somewhat understandable because there are actually more apartments than homes in New York City, and it is really more of a rental market. It's also a transient market as well, meaning people don't always stay in New York City. They'll come here, live here for a while, and then they'll move out. Well, I wanted to know why, and I was speaking to a friend about that, and she said that there is some fear of success. And as many of you on my page, you know that real estate is what's owned by 90% of people who are wealthy. It's an investment that can be passed down from generation to generation. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring back the past, so to speak, and see where the fears came in, and let's reevaluate it to see what can be done to change it or what has changed already. Well, one of the things that she brought up that she says made people afraid to invest, particularly African American, was Black Wall Street. I didn't really know too much about it because, to be honest, they didn't teach that to me in school. And I just heard about it in passing by listening to other YouTube videos or people speaking about it, but nobody really went in depth with it. So I took it upon myself to do further research. What I found was that there's actually 3 Black Wall Streets. The most popular one is Tulsa, Oklahoma. Then you have Durham, North Carolina, which was the first one. And then you also have Richmond, Virginia, which was also known as Black Wall Street. And that also was created before the one in Tulsa. But since Tulsa is the most popular one that's talked about the most, but just in case there's someone else who didn't know about it, let me just share it with you. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, back in 1906 was when it was officially started. But there was a big migration before Oklahoma or Tulsa was actually indoctrinated into the United States of America. There was actually a lot of Black people who moved to Oklahoma and set up towns. But the Greenwood neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma was the most profitable and the most well-known. It was once referred to by people outside of the neighborhood as Little Africa. One of the reasons why it was so successful is because there was a lot of segregation. Many of the white people who moved in segregated themselves from the Black people, so they had no choice but to buy from themselves. They built and they co-opted together many of the businesses that were there, and many of the businesses thrived. Most of the people, they also lived in, let me not say most of the people, but you had a lot of doctors, lawyers, business owners. You had a lot of, from what I was told, beautiful, expensive houses in that area. One of the people in real estate that stand out is O.W. Gurley, who had a rooming house and many residences. And you have another person that stands out. His name is J.B. Stratford. He bought real estate there, subdivided it, and sold it to individuals, and then he built his hotel. So those are one of the 2 more famous real estate people in that particular area. But unfortunately, the Black people there did lose a lot. They lost everything, basically, and it was due to a race riot massacre. Now, it's not clear exactly the whole in details as far as what led to it. So far, what I gathered is that there was a 17-year-old white girl who operated the elevator in a store, and there was a 19-year-old Black boy who worked as a shoe shine person in the same store. They worked there for several years, and one day he got on the elevator, then he got off, and she was screaming. Now, from what may have happened is the elevator from two different sources. The elevator that particular day and even thereafter didn't meet the floor. So one account says that he did trip into the elevator, and the other account says that he may have tripped, they're not sure, and that he accidentally fell on the girl. Well, being that this is during the time of heavy racism, when a Black man touches a white girl, that can be an issue, and it was an issue. And they said it was the worst riot that one of the worst riots that America has ever witnessed. They did try to rebuild the town up during the Depression, before the Depression, but when the Depression hit, it fell down again, and the neighborhood was prey to crime. So they are still currently revitalizing the area. There is a stadium that was built to promote tourism, but it was really a devastating loss to all that were involved, both the Black people there and also to the white people there, because it eventually hurt their business as well. And unfortunately, and this is something I'm going to have to do myself, the insurance did not cover the cost of the buildings that were burnt down because there was no clause in there to protect you against rioting. And I never thought to even, let me go over my insurance and check to make sure that is not there. The next town I want to talk to you guys about is Jackson Ward in Virginia, which was established in 1871. It was a business community that was set up after the Civil War. It was known as the Harlem of the South. It was the center of Black commerce and entertainment. During the Civil Rights Movement, it was known as the Chitlin Circuit. However, even though it was so profitable, desegregation produced a decline in the Black people that were living there from advancing. Here's what seemed to have happened. There was an assembly created called the Virginia General Assembly, and they were responsible for putting up homes and tearing them down. There was a city council, and I know I've mentioned this before in other broadcasts. The city council did not have any Black people on there. It was basically elite white people that were on the city council. And in many cities to this day, things have to be approved by them before anything gets built up or torn down. Well, needless to say, they hired a redeveloper, and he put eminent domain up in the area of Jackson Ward so that they could build a highway, and I believe that highway is I-95 or part of I-95. There was also eminent domain to build boulevards and to put up more office buildings. They destroyed the original housing that was there. And after they put up the boulevard and the highway, they actually replaced the houses there with public housing, the projects. Now, what was strange is that they had 576 applicants to these public housing projects. Only 25 of them applied. Most of the original residents were offered grants to move elsewhere. Now, there were some poor white people in a neighborhood adjacent to it, and some of them did also live in Jackson Ward as well. The real estate agents, many convinced them that they should move and sell their homes at a lower cost because Black people were moving in. Now, the whites that did not move out, they got eminent domain issued on them. This way, the government didn't have to pay them the full price. They didn't know that they were actually being lied to get out of the neighborhood fast, number one, and so that the government could acquire their property at a lower price. Later, I guess some Black people, they realized what was going on, so they contacted the NAACP. And the NAACP got involved. They fought them on the displacement. After that happened, what occurred was a lot of people did start to go back into the area and buy up single-family homes. But those people were mainly absentee landlords who neglected the care of the area. In 1970, there was more Black people that were elected to city council. And city council at that time put an end to a lot of what was promised during the eminent domain. They landmarked the area of Jackson Ward in 1978. So now the whole area is considered a historical area. And I want to just point that out to you. In a previous episode, I mentioned that money alone is not going to get us through. Political action is something that is necessary in order for us to transform our neighborhoods. We don't necessarily have to run for president of the United States or mayor, even though that would be a good thing. But city council, these small boards that normally, even some of the boards where it's actually volunteer and you don't even get elected, it's important to be on the board or at least show up to the meetings. Right, moving fast forward to the time now, the whole area is being revitalized. And if you do go down there, you will see that there is some gentrification occurring. And this neighborhood, which was predominantly Black, now the white people have outnumbered the Black people. That's how it stands today. So there's a little bit of controversy over the gentrification that's occurring there. And then now the last neighborhood that I'd like to bring to your attention, which is also the first Black Wall Street, is Parish Street in Durham, North Carolina, which was established in the late 1800s. The area was once known as the District of New York City. It was the economic center of Black life. They had the largest number of Negro businesses, Black-owned businesses, in 1910. The two men who were instrumental in setting that up is John Merrick and Charles Spalding. they started the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company. The two men, even though they were successful, unlike some of the successful people that we have today, they did not isolate themselves from the Black community. They gave back and they hired their own. Believe it or not, there really wasn't too much of a clash between whites and blacks. Now, this is what surprised me. Rich white people actually had a positive relationship with them and mentored this business and many other Black businesses because they didn't see them as a threat. They saw them as an asset, because the more customers that they gained, the Black American businesses gained, the more customers they actually gained. So they actually complemented one another and they helped each other out, which I thought that was pretty good. Now, there was one thing though. Some of the poorer whites did feel threatened, thinking that they would lose their job. But the truth is they really didn't have much to be scared of, because there was actually more jobs than people. But from time to time, they would have gangs go out and try and burn down a couple of the Black businesses. And then later on in the 1960s, the local government that was there, which I don't believe had many African Americans serving there, they issued urban renewal and displaced many African American businesses in Durham, North Carolina. And it seems as though desegregation just destroyed the whole progress of it. So that's basically what I learned from those two areas. From North Carolina and Virginia, our political representation is important, and the lack of political representation is what brought us down. Now, there are other towns that were predominantly Black, or all Black owned or Black founded, that I feel do deserve mention. And there's a lesson to be learned in the following two that I'm going to bring up. One is Boley, Oklahoma. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It was established in 1903. The Black people there had their own bank, had their own hospitals, had their own colleges, had their own electric company. Yes, they had generated their own power. They even supported a local railroad stop for, I believe it was Amtrak but it wasn't called Amtrak during that time. I forgot the exact name. Now, it was successful for many years. There were actually at one time 200 Black-owned businesses in Boley, Oklahoma. Unfortunately, they fell when the Depression hit because their main staple was agriculture. Cotton was cash. So I've mentioned this in another broadcast when I was talking about choosing your market. You don't want to choose a place where there's only one staple, when there's only one market. You want it when you are choosing to invest. You want to invest in a place that has multiple markets, so that when one area is hit, there's another area to bring it back up. And as an example of this, I'm going to talk about another Black neighborhood that's located on the south shore of Staten Island called Sandy Ground. It is one of the oldest Black American communities in the United States, 195 years old to be exact, where it continues to survive and thrive. And mind you, it was 4 years ago, it was hit by Hurricane Sandy, and they are still continuing on. It was settled in 1828. And basically what happened here is this. The blacks that were in New York, a certain number of them that came up from slavery or escaped from slavery, they went to New York City. New York City actually did have slavery for a while, and it did end, but the racism didn't start. So they didn't stop, sorry. So they got sick and tired of the racism that they had to deal with. So they said, well, let us go to Staten Island. Let us develop our own community near the southern end of Staten Island. And this way we don't have to deal with any racism and we don't have to worry about slavery. So they settled in 1828, establishing their own neighborhood. They also made it part of the Underground Railroad to assist slaves that had escaped. Now, the original ones that were there, they wanted to be farmers. And so they started growing strawberries because when the earth is sandy, not everything can grow. But strawberries was popular then, so they started to grow that. The government, for some reason, issued some law against it eventually that hindered them. So they switched over to oysters. And they were very popular with that. The waters unfortunately became polluted. So then they switched over and built factories. So what I believe kept them abreast is not only did they have more than one thing to sustain them, but they were also adaptable to change. And I think that is something that we should learn when we are going to invest. Make sure you invest in a place that, again, has more than one industry, because that's how Staten Island was able to survive and Bowley wasn't. Now I want to talk about some individuals in real estate who invested during the time of slavery. Hopefully this will give you a little inspiration as well. First, George Downing. If many of you look at my Newport, Rhode Island album, you will see that I have a picture of Downing Street. That street was owned, well, every business that was on that street was owned by a man named George Downing. He had a restaurant in Newport, Rhode Island, New York, and DC. He used those as part of the Underground Railroad. In addition to the restaurants, he also owned a bank, a hotel, a hospital for the Naval Academy, and Toro Park in Newport, Rhode Island. He also was instrumental in the politics when it came to expanding Bellevue Avenue up there. Now, just to give you a little background, now he was a free man. He was not a slave. His grandparents were. He was an abolitionist, a civil rights leader, a community leader. He championed equal education for children and equal employment for all. Unlike Frederick Douglass, the two of them did bump heads. He encouraged Black people to move north for freedom instead of trying to fighting to live in the South as a free person and a slave. He was also a fighter of women's rights. Now, if you say Downing sounds familiar, but you're not familiar with the name George, it's the first time you hear about it, you might have heard about his father, Thomas Downing. Thomas Downing was considered the Oyster King of New York. He also made his restaurant part of the Underground Railroad. His clientele were rich white men. That's one of the reasons why he was so successful and had so much money. He was also part of the Committee of 13 that would stop people from reselling Black men and women into slavery. And to this day, He is the only man. He is the only man of color, but he's the only man, period, where the New York Stock Exchange was shut down the day that he died, because in his restaurant, he got along with so many people. And like I said before, his clientele was predominantly white males. So they considered him, I guess, like family or brother or something. So out of respect, the New York Stock Exchange was shut down on Wall Street in honor of him. Now, the next person I'm going to talk about is Clara Brown. She was born in 1800 as a slave from Virginia. At 56 is when she was freed. But in that time in Virginia, if you became a freed slave, you were required to leave the state, so she couldn't stay there. She decided to go out west, and she settled eventually in Aurora, Colorado. She became a maid, a cook. She was a midwife. She was also one of the pioneers of the gold rush. Eventually, she ended up owning her own laundry business. She also assisted in setting up certain churches out in the West. The money that she made, she took it and she invested in a lot of properties, including coal mines, of all things. Somebody who was a slave, got freed at 56, now has property, not just houses, but coal mines. She was known for both emotional and financial support. She helped free not only her own family, but she also helped free other African American slaves. And not only did she help them find freedom, she also helped them find jobs as well. The home that she had turned that into a hospital and a respite. She actually, and this is very inspiring to me, she did not find one of her children, the last one, until she was 82 years old. And she died soon after, like a year or two after she found her last child that she set free at 82. Now, unfortunately, the sad part is she did not die a rich woman. She lost money, some of it, yes, to charities, some of it, yes, to helping families. But she was also, and this is what got me, is that she was cheated by real estate agents during the time. So even though she acquired great wealth, I know this too well, is that when you don't have the right team behind you, when you don't have the right people behind you, they will rip you off. So hopefully what I just shared with you guys, you'll take the lessons learned from the mistakes that happened in the past, and the success of the past will inspire you to go ahead and try to invest or buy property. As you can see here, and the other thing I want you to take from this is this: our ancestors, those of you who are African American, they did not have technology. Many times they did not have a lot of money. Some did not have education. Some had to teach themselves how to read, how to do math. But they were able to buy property, build, and create way back then. So we today, with all that we have, there is no excuse why we cannot buy property. Some of us really, all we need to do is learn how to discipline ourselves, budget, and reprioritize how we spend our money. And we can have the same American dream, and we can build our communities up the same way our families did, and we can learn from their mistakes instead of being scared of being successful. Well, folks, that's all I have for you tonight. Hopefully, the information will inspire you to reboot your mind, reset your focus, and make smart financial moves. Feel free to pass it along. Remember, each one, reach one, teach one. Bye for now. Until next time, have a good night.